When my ex told me I wasn't wife material, I laughed it off. But when he got engaged 6 months later to someone he'd been seeing behind my back, I knew exactly what I had to do. I bought the most stunning white dress I could find and showed up to his engagement party. Before we dive into this absolutely wild story of revenge and karma, hit that like button if you've ever wanted to get back at an ex who underestimated you. And don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss stories like this one. You know that feeling when you think you know someone completely? That's exactly how I felt about Marcus. 3 years together, and I genuinely believed we were building something real. He was everything I thought I wanted: successful marketing executive, charming smile that could light up a room, and the kind of confidence that made me feel safe. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I ignored, but back then I was wearing rose-colored glasses so thick they might as well have been blindfolds. Marcus had this way of making subtle comments that chipped away at my confidence without me even realizing it. When I got excited about a promotion at work, he'd say things like, "That's great, babe, but don't let it go to your head." When I'd suggest we move in together, he'd laugh and say, "Let's not rush into anything." I told myself he was just being practical, that his caution meant he was taking our relationship seriously. What I didn't understand was that he was keeping me at arm's length, while making me feel like I was the one who wasn't ready for commitment. The breakup came out of nowhere. We were sitting in his apartment, sharing takeout like we had hundreds of times before, when he suddenly got this serious look on his face. "We need to talk," he said, and my stomach dropped. I thought maybe he was finally going to propose or at least suggest we take the next step. Instead, he delivered the words that would haunt me for months. "You're amazing, but you're just not wife material." I remember sitting there, chopsticks halfway to my mouth, trying to process what he just said. Wife material? What did that even mean? I asked him to explain, but he just shook his head and said it wasn't anything specific, just a feeling he had. He told me I was too focused on my career, too independent, too much of a free spirit. The irony wasn't lost on me. These were all things he claimed to love about me when we first started dating. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I dissected every conversation we'd ever had, every moment where I might have shown him I wasn't wife material. I called in sick to work more than I cared to admit, spending entire days in bed scrolling through Pinterest boards of engagement rings and wedding dresses, wondering what Sarah Michelle Gellar or Jennifer Aniston had that I didn't. My friends tried to convince me that Marcus was an idiot, that any man who couldn't see my worth didn't deserve me, but their words felt empty. If I wasn't wife material to someone who knew me better than anyone, what hope did I have with anyone else? I started therapy, which was honestly the best decision I made during that entire period. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that Marcus's opinion of me wasn't a reflection of my worth as a person or as a potential partner. She made me realize that wife material was just another way of saying someone who will make herself smaller to fit into my life, and that maybe, just maybe, I was better off without someone who wanted to shrink me down to a manageable size. Slowly, I started rebuilding my confidence. I threw myself into work, got that promotion Marcus had been so dismissive about, and started reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during our relationship. I was finally starting to feel like myself again when the universe decided to test just how much healing. It was a random Tuesday evening, 6 months after the breakup, when my entire world shifted on its axis. I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, something I'd been doing more often since the breakup as a way to avoid thinking about my own life, when Marcus's face appeared on my screen. He was beaming, his arm wrapped around a woman I vaguely recognized, and the caption made my blood run cold. She said yes. Can't wait to marry my best friend. 8 months together and I've never been happier. 8 months. 8 months. I did the math in my head 3 times before it really sank in. Marcus and I had broken up 6 months ago, which meant he'd been with Sarah for 2 months while we were still together. 2 months of I love yous, and shared dinners and lazy Sunday mornings while he was building a relationship with someone else. The wife material comment suddenly took on a whole new meaning. It wasn't that I lacked something essential for marriage. It was that he'd already found someone he wanted to marry, and it wasn't me. The woman in the photo was Sarah Kim, someone I'd met at a few of Marcus's work events. She was everything I wasn't: petite where I was tall, soft-spoken where I was opinionated, traditional where I was modern. During those work parties, I'd noticed how Marcus's eyes would light up when he talked to her, but I dismissed it as professional camaraderie. Now I realized I'd been watching my replacement charm my boyfriend right in front of me. I screenshot the post and sent it to my best friend Jess with a single word: help. She called me immediately, her voice shaking with rage. "That absolute piece of garbage," she said. I knew something was off about him those last few months. He was being weird whenever his phone buzzed, and he kept talking about this brilliant new coworker. Jess's validation felt like a lifeline. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't imagining things Marcus had been checking out while I was still fully invested in our relationship. Over the next few days, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. My friend Rachel admitted she'd seen Marcus and Sarah having lunch together months before our breakup, but she'd assumed it was work-related. My coworker Mike mentioned that Marcus had been asking about hypothetical relationship advice around the same time. Questions about how to know when you found the one. Each revelation felt like a fresh wound, but also like validation that my instincts hadn't been wrong. The cruelest part was realizing that Marcus had probably been comparing me to Sarah for months before he finally worked up the courage to leave. Every time I'd been too tired for a work event, Sarah had probably been there, charming and available. Every time I prioritized my career over his needs, Sarah had probably been offering the kind of support he wanted. I wasn't lacking in wife material. I was just the wrong woman for a man who'd already found his perfect match. The rage that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just anger at Marcus for cheating and lying. It was fury at myself for not seeing the signs, at Sarah for participating in the deception, at the entire situation for making me question my worth when the real problem was Marcus's inability to be honest. I fantasized about confronting him, about exposing his lies to everyone we knew, about making him pay for the months of self-doubt he'd put me through. But more than anything, I wanted him to know that I was thriving without him. I wanted him to see that the woman he deemed not wife material was actually a catch, and that his opinion of me said more about his character than mine. I just didn't know how to make that happen until the perfect opportunity literally showed up in my mailbox. The engagement party invitation arrived on a Thursday, delivered by mutual friends who clearly had no idea about the timeline of Marcus's relationship with Sarah. It was elegant, printed on thick cardstock with gold lettering that announced their celebration of love at the Riverside Country Club. The audacity of inviting me to celebrate the relationship that had overlapped with ours was breathtaking, but I had to admire the efficiency. Why not invite the ex-girlfriend to witness your triumph? My first instinct was to throw the invitation in the trash and pretend it never happened. The mature thing would be to politely decline, maybe send a generic congratulations card, and move on with my life. But as I stared at that invitation, something fierce and primal rose up in me. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough, every person who'd been replaced and made to feel like the problem was with them. I called Jess and she answered on the first ring. "Please tell me you're not actually considering going to this thing," she said before I could even speak. But as I explained my growing desire to attend, she got quiet. "You know what?" she finally said. "Maybe you should go." Not to cause drama, but to show up as the incredible woman you are. Let him see what he gave up. That weekend, I went shopping with a very specific mission in mind. I needed a dress that would make a statement, something that would remind everyone in that room, including Marcus, that I was a force to be reckoned with. After trying on dozens of options, I found it. A stunning white dress that fit like it was made for me. It wasn't wedding white, but it was close enough to send a message. The saleswoman looked concerned when I told her it was for an engagement party, but I just smiled and said, "Trust me, it's perfect." The symbolism wasn't lost on me. White represents new beginnings, purity, confidence. If Marcus wanted to paint me as someone who wasn't worthy of marriage, I'd show up looking like I belonged in a wedding dress more than anyone else in that room. I paired it with elegant heels and simple jewelry. Nothing that screamed, "Look at me," but everything that whispered, "You made a mistake." I spent the week before the party preparing mentally. I practiced conversations in the mirror, rehearsed responses to the inevitable questions about why I was there. I wasn't going to be petty or dramatic. I was going to be gracious, confident, and undeniably fabulous. If Marcus wanted to see wife material, I'd show him exactly what he'd let slip through his fingers. The night before the party, I called my therapist for an emergency session. "I need to know I'm doing this for the right reasons," I told Dr. Martinez. She listened as I explained my plan, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "It sounds like you're reclaiming your power," she finally said. "Just remember, you can't control how others react, only how you show up. Make sure you're doing this for you, not for him." Her words gave me the final push I needed. This wasn't about winning Marcus back or destroying his relationship. It was about proving to myself that I had nothing to be ashamed of. I was going to walk into that room with my head held high, wearing white like the queen I'd always been, and remind everyone present that being deemed not wife material by one man didn't diminish my worth by even a fraction. The Riverside Country Club was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers that screamed, "We have money and want everyone to know it." I'd timed my arrival perfectly late enough to make an entrance, but not so late that I'd miss the key moments. As I walked through the doors in my stunning white dress, I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. The reaction was immediate and exactly what I'd hoped for. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people tried to process what they were seeing. Some faces showed confusion, others admiration, and a few displayed the kind of shock that comes from witnessing something you never thought you'd see. I smiled graciously and began working the room, greeting old friends and acquaintances as if nothing unusual was happening. Marcus spotted me from across the room, and I watched his face go through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, anger, and something that might have been regret. He excused himself from the conversation he was having and started making his way toward me, but I wasn't going to make it easy for him. I turned my attention to his cousin David, someone I'd always gotten along with during family gatherings. "You look absolutely stunning," David said, and I could tell he meant it. "That dress is incredible on you." Other guests began gathering around, offering similar compliments. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, at Marcus's engagement party, receiving more genuine admiration than I'd gotten from him in months. Marcus finally reached me, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. "Can we talk?" he said, not quite managing to keep the edge out of his voice. I smiled sweetly and said, "Of course, but let's not keep your guests waiting. This is such a wonderful party." He grabbed my elbow a little too firmly and guided me toward a quieter corner of the room. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed once we were out of earshot. "You can't just show up here wearing white. It's inappropriate and you know it." I looked at him with the kind of calm that only comes from absolute certainty that you're in the right. You said I wasn't wife material, I replied, my voice steady and clear. I thought I'd show you what you missed. The color drained from his face. He'd expected me to be defensive, to apologize or make excuses. Instead, I was standing there looking like everything he claimed I could never be, and we both knew it. That's not what I meant and you know it, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Besides, this is about Sarah and me now. You're being selfish. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared at his side. Her face flushed with what I initially thought was anger but quickly realized was confusion. Marcus, who is this? She asked, though I could tell she already knew. This is my ex-girlfriend, he said reluctantly. She was just leaving. Actually, I said, extending my hand to Sarah. I'm not leaving just yet. I'm so sorry we haven't had a chance to properly meet before. I've heard so much about you. Sarah shook my hand, and I could see the wheels turning in her head as she processed the timeline. How long did you two date? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. 3 years, I said, watching as Marcus's face went pale. We broke up about 6 months ago. Sarah's expression shifted as she did the same math I'd done when I saw the engagement announcement. 6 months, she repeated slowly. But Marcus and I have been together for 8 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Sarah's face was a mixture of hurt and dawning realization, and I actually felt sorry for her. She was learning the same lesson I'd learned, that Marcus wasn't the man either of us had thought he was. I think we need to talk, Sarah said to Marcus, her voice barely above a whisper. Privately. They walked away together, leaving me standing there with a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I'd gotten the confrontation I'd wanted, but seeing the pain in Sarah's eyes reminded me that she was as much a victim of Marcus's deception as I was. The rest of the evening unfolded like a slow-motion car crash that I couldn't look away from. Sarah and Marcus's private conversation turned into a heated discussion that several guests couldn't help but overhear. I watched from across the room as Sarah's voice got louder and Marcus's posture became more defensive. Other guests began whispering among themselves, piecing together the drama that was unfolding at what was supposed to be a celebration of love. Marcus's college friend Tom approached me at the bar, his face apologetic. I owe you an apology, he said. I knew something was off about the timeline, but I didn't want to get involved. I should have said something to you months ago. Other people began sharing similar stories. They'd seen Marcus and Sarah together, had suspected something was happening, but hadn't wanted to be the bearer of bad news. The most revealing conversation came from Marcus's coworker Jennifer, who'd apparently been watching the situation unfold with growing concern. He's been different at work these past few months, she confided. More secretive, always on his phone. We all thought it was just new relationship excitement, but now, I'm wondering if there were others before Sarah too. As the evening progressed, the party's atmosphere shifted from celebration to something more like a wake. Guests began leaving early, offering awkward congratulations to Marcus and sympathetic looks to Sarah. I watched as Marcus tried to salvage the situation, moving from group to group trying to control the narrative, but the damage was done. His reputation as the charming, successful bachelor was crumbling in real time. Around 10 o'clock, Sarah approached me again. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. I need to know, she said. Were there signs? Things I should have seen. I felt a wave of compassion for her that surprised me. There were, I said gently. But he's very good at making you feel like you're the problem, not him. We talked for another hour, comparing notes about Marcus's behavior, his patterns, his lies. It was cathartic for both of us to realize we weren't crazy, that our instincts had been right even when we dismissed them. By the time we said goodbye, I felt like I'd gained something more valuable than revenge. I'd gained perspective. 2 weeks later, Jess called me with news that shouldn't have surprised me but somehow did. Sarah called off the engagement, she said. Apparently, she did some digging and found out Marcus had been on dating apps, even after they got engaged. She's done with him completely. The final twist came a month later when Marcus showed up at my apartment, flowers in hand and contrition in his voice. "I made a mistake," he said. "You were wife material all along. I was just too stupid to see it." I looked at him, this man who'd made me question my worth, who'd cheated on me and lied about it, who'd caused me months of unnecessary pain, and felt absolutely nothing. "I'm glad you finally figured that out," I said. "But I'm not interested in being your backup plan." I closed the door on him and on that chapter of my life, finally free from the hold his opinion had had on me. The strangest part of this whole story is that Sarah and I became friends. We bonded over our shared experience of being deceived by the same man, and she turned out to be genuinely lovely, just someone who'd been manipulated by a master manipulator. We still laugh about the engagement party, about how wearing white to someone else's celebration turned out to be the most empowering thing I'd ever done. And that's how I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply showing up and being your authentic self. Wearing that white dress wasn't about ruining Marcus's engagement party. It was about reclaiming my power and showing everyone, including myself, that I was never the problem. His inability to be honest and faithful had nothing to do with whether I was wife material, and everything to do with his own character flaws. If this story taught you anything about knowing your worth, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself, and remember, you are always enough, regardless of what anyone else says. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. Sometimes the universe has a funny way of serving justice, and sometimes we just need to show up in a white dress to help it along.